Good evening. Apologize for our tardiness. I was trying to wrangle every chicken. We have 2 speckled chickens that really like to give you the runaround. They will wait to the last minute, and then when you get them close, like she came close, but then she won't come in the door. And then she just about come in the coop door, and then one tries to leave, and then she runs around, and then you have to, it's a whole thing. It's fun. I think she does it for fun. Both of the speckles. It's a thrill. But that is the reason we are just a few minutes late, but we are so excited.
I was seated here at 5 o'clock.
Yeah, you were.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't apologize.
Yeah, it's been a minute since we've gone live. We've been in a bit of a wonderful hibernation, and we're ready to come out with something brand new and fun, which is Imagination School. This is an idea that has been cooking up, I'd say, for a little while, because we really, really love talking about the mind in this way. And so if you've taken Awareness School, so some people are like, oh, do I need to take Awareness School before Imagination School? What's the deal with that? So the way that I look at, the beingness, like the wholeness of the human being, we have mind, body, spirit, right? So the mind, that's like the Awareness School stuff of like how to operate your mind. It's absolutely essential. I think that Awareness School is like 101 for operating in life. So I do recommend taking Awareness School at some point. It's super great. Then we have all the GNM work, the resolve classes, the language of adaptation, the integration of understanding how the biology expresses and adapts to conflicts in the psyche. And then we have the spirit, the mind, the consciousness, the imagination. And so that's really what Imagination School is going to be about. It's about states of consciousness. It's about really deeply understanding that we're living in a dream world, basically. And it's how to wake up in the dream and start to, like lucid dreaming, where you wake up in your dream and you start realizing, oh, I can do whatever right now. Like we are bound by our ideas about ourselves. We are bound by these concepts, these identities, these shells we've taken on because of conflicts and stuff that has happened to us, and ancestry and parents. And so all of that stuff is influencing you right now and what you assume is true about you. And that's why you are experiencing everything in your life the way that you are. Money, body, friends, family, work, everything is an outward reflection of your inward state of consciousness, your unconscious assumptions about how you think it has to be for you. And in Imagination School, it's all about taking down all of those limitations and imaginary walls that you've built up between you and the stuff that you want. And it's learning how to enter into a new state without having any physical external evidence that you can be a millionaire, have the stuff you want, live the kind of life that you want. Like right now, that a lot of things may not seem true to you. There might be a voice in your head that's like, well, I can't do that because I have to work 9 to 5, or because I have, all these limitations that make it so I can't experience or have that outcome. But what if that's not true? What if it truly is? It's a move in consciousness, a move in the inner state of your being. And if you can occupy that state and get so that it feels just as natural as what you're experiencing right now, that magical and really interesting things that appear in your external world to just happen, right? It's like, it's so easy to say, oh, it just would have happened anyways. And so this is kind of the intricacies of how to bring this idea to life in your life.
Mm-hmm. So as far as I can tell, spirituality is a guide for intrapersonal conduct. So it's what are you doing within yourself? It's like a purely psychological thing. It's got nothing to do with morality in terms of how you behave towards other people or things of that nature. It's the really esoteric element. Like, I'm not saying it's bad if there's an organization that gets together and talks about God and also like gets sweaters for people, you know what I mean? Or says, hey, you shouldn't kill them. That's not nice. That's okay. But I'm saying like the real kind of fundamental core message that's contained in certain sort of ancient teachings pertains to something more important than any kind of morality that you might express at the level of the world. That the world is kind of this place where you're sort of plopped down here to sort of learn things. And the things that you're here to learn are not worldly things, like be nice to other people. I mean, although that may be a fine thing to do, and that might be in some way or another connected to the sort of, self-discovery that you're doing, there are things that aren't going to be sort of written down clearly in a book somewhere, because it wouldn't make any sense to somebody who read it, right? And so, I mean, pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, Imagination School is our presentation of the teachings of Neville Goddard. Would you say that's fair? And it's about learning how, I mean, so just as a for instance, right? You were talking about something about, I don't believe I can have, I think it was about money, right? Like, I don't believe that I could have $1 million, or I don't believe I could be financially secure, or whatever, financially comfortable, financially extremely comfortable, financially delighted, and you said what something to the fact that there was a voice in the head, right? Now, for a lot of people, there's a voice in the head. They just listen to the voice. They don't kind of meditate on, reflect upon the fact that that voice is there, right? One of the concepts that we're going to be covering is that imagination is in operation at every moment in time. So that, I mean, this is kind of one of the mantras I'll just repeat to myself as I go throughout the day, and just notice that when I feel like I'm just perceiving the world, I'm just perceiving reality, I'm just perceiving what's true. Maybe I am perceiving reality. Maybe I am perceiving something that is factually true right now, but that's not all that's going on. There is an imaginal activity that's going on inside that is fundamentally creative. And so I don't know if you're familiar with Neville Goddard, or if you have any kind of a religious background or anything like that, but so there are kind of like two types of people who struggle with the sorts of things that we'll be talking about in Imagination School. There are people who don't like some of the or who are somewhat uncomfortable with what we're going to talk about, because it sounds like religious tradition that they've left behind. I grew up around that. I grew up around people who use those words. Those words are associated with either something traumatic, or maybe it was just a traumatic boredom or nonsense, right? And so I don't like that. That was kind of the perspective I was coming from. And then on the other hand, you have people who are somewhat uncomfortable with these teachings because they're attached to certain religious ideas that these teachings might be perceived as sort of threatening, right? Sort of like, we're talking about maybe teachings from the Bible and interpreting them, say, in a psychological light. And then you get uncomfortable because, I'm uptight about the historicity of the Bible. I was raised in a certain tradition of interpreting that, so I don't know. So those are kind of like the two types of frameworks that can make a person uncomfortable with some of these things. And then there's some sort of like new agey spiritually people who kind of don't have any problem with it, and they listen to it and they understand it and they think it's great, right? But they don't necessarily take it to the next level. And this was kind of me too. When I read Neville Goddard the first time, I knew, okay, intellectually I understand what this guy's talking about, but I'm also acutely aware of the fact that there's a lot of tradition that is clogging my brain and preventing me from fully understanding the relevance of this teaching for me. And so basically what we've done is gone through, we've spent 6 years probably working with the Neville stuff. And I remember like in 2018 when we first got into it, the first impulse was, oh my God, we got to make a course about this. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because I know I could probably describe this to people in a way that would be compelling, but I don't feel like I have mastery of this. I don't feel like I have even begun to cultivate mastery of this within myself. So it's taken like years and years and years of listening to him describe things and watching my own mind as I go throughout my day and thinking I was doing things correctly, and then contrasting that with this is a kind of good exercise. Sit down and try to imagine the life that you want. Very often it's hard for people. They feel silly, it's uncomfortable. I don't even know, am I imagining right now? I get distracted. There's all sorts of things that come up. Like if you just say, I'm going to take 15 minutes and lie down and clear my mind, and I'm going to visualize and talk to myself about all of the things that I really want to have most in this world. Like if you do that, probably you'll have a difficult time concentrating on that, really evoking the feelings that would be yours were that your current reality and all this different stuff. But if as you go throughout your day, you think about someone who maybe did you wrong at some point in the past, and you begin to imagine having an extremely unpleasant conversation with that person, I'll bet you would get lost in that imaginal activity so quickly, so deeply, and so thoroughly that you wouldn't even realize you were engaging in it. And so that's like one of the big challenges for people. Everybody is imagining all the time. The issue arises when a person starts to try to imagine on purpose, right? Then I get weird about it. Then it's kind of like, probably many of you can be quite charming without even meaning to. But if you set out to be charming on purpose, I'm going to charm that person, right? Very often it's difficult to translate that natural ability that you have into a specific situation where you want, a lot of people are really great at, making other people comfortable. But if they see someone and they go, oh my God, I need to make them comfortable, they're not comfortable, then it's hard to do on purpose. And so what imagination school is going to be about, there's going to be theory, but most of the time we're going to spend helping you to understand what exactly it looks like for you to implement these principles of mind in your life. And to really strip it of any sort of religious tradition connotation, and to really to make it, I don't want it to be something where it's like a thing that you add to your repertoire of things you've learned about. When you really cultivate this, when you really work at it, it becomes just a part of who you are. As you go throughout your day, you're like a child who naturally just imagines the things that they want. It's the most wonderful thing. Life comes alive for you. You learn how to do this thing. So, do you want to say something?
No.
Okay. So, just kind of describing what the project is about. And this is a little bit of Neville and it's a little bit of our interpretation of it. There's basically different aspects to you. There is your physical senses. I mean, you've got eyes and ears and all this different stuff, and you can perceive physical reality. There's your reasoning mind. Now, your reasoning mind takes the information that your senses gives you, and it then puts together little stories about what's true, what's possible, what's likely, what's inevitable, etc. And then you have your imagination. Now, your imagination is a really wonderful thing. It's a magnificent talent because it allows you to perceive realities that are not physically present. As an example, let's say that you're at work, right? Your home is a reality, but it's not physically present, but you can perceive it if you exercise your imagination. In order to do that, though, you've got to cleave your imagination away from your physical senses, the information your physical senses are giving you, and what your reasoning rational mind is telling you on the basis of those physical senses. Who cares? I can visualize my home when I'm at work. Great, thanks a lot. That's just kind of a basic illustration of this idea that you've got these different faculties of mind. What we're going to be talking about in imagination school is how to use that to actually start to affect the physical world, to start to change things. Because there is a part of you that is capable of splitting off from what your mind is telling you is true right now and entering into, like you said in the beginning, entering into states that are real but that are not physically expressed, and then bringing those states into being. Now, how practically does an individual do that? How do you change the feeling of I? How do you practically change who and what you are aware of being? When your physical senses and your reasoning mind and the people in your life, the circumstances in your life are inviting you to be aware of being what? Alone, or not good enough, or unwanted, or undeserving, or all the crap that people deal with, right? I mean, it's not fun, but everyone kind of has the same basic stuff they're kind of stuck with. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could be invited by the physical senses in your reasoning mind to feel unwanted, but that you could use your imagination to say, what would it be like if I felt wanted? What would it be like if I felt exactly the way what would it be like if I were aware of being someone who is very much in demand, whether it's socially, professionally, romantically, whatever the case may be. And you actually learn to evoke from within yourself the awareness of being that which you want to be. And it affects you, and it's not what you're thinking. It's not like going around and you affirm, I'm wanted, I'm talking about the thing in the back behind everything else, that basic fundamental awareness of being. Like, there's the part of your mind that you can make do things. Like you can visualize a monkey. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you can say, I'm going to get up and walk across the room. But there's also another aspect of you that's sort of in the background, or it's kind of deeper than that. And this is the part that reminds you of things you don't necessarily want to be reminded of. This is the part that causes you, there's just a feeling that just seems to be present within you. That's these assumptions that are sort of buried deep within you. It's a deeper aspect of yourself that is generating all of the stuff that's sort of projected onto the screen of your mind. And we're going to be talking about using your imagination to change the stuff that part is communicating to you. We're going to teach you practically how to persuade yourself of the truth of something that you want to have in your life so that you can experience. For a lot of people, they have a desire, and they experience that desire as something that is very much absent from their life. So they wake up and instantly they're aware of the absence of what they don't want. They're aware of the absence of what they want. They go throughout their day. Let's say they want to have a nice relationship with their partner, a loving, intimate, where they talk to each other and you're sweet to each other all the time. And you wake up and the first thing you think is, oh my gosh, I don't have that kind of relationship. And then you go in and you have coffee and he or she just walks by and it's just very perfunctory. And you go, oh, it's not that way. Oh my God, and you react to them and you react to the day as a person who is aware of not having the thing that you want to have. And there are feelings that come along with that. There are behavioral reactions that are associated with that awareness. Now, you've got two choices, basically. One, sit around and wait for things out here to change. Sit around and wait for the physical senses and the reasoning mind to invite you to become aware of being someone who has what you want. Or learn to rely upon your savior, which is your imagination, which has the ability to enter into and become aware of and be aware from a state of consciousness that is not currently physically expressed. It really is very much like being an explorer. I know what I want. I want to have X amount of money. I know what I want. I want to have this relationship. What would it be like if I were aware of having it now? What would it be like, right? Now, you could just kind of go, well, it'd be great. That's not going to cut it. It's actually, I need to go inside. I need to make contact. I need to figure out what part of me is my imagination, what part of me is my mind, what part of me is anchored to this, what part of me is maybe anchored to it, but could detach from this awareness of what I currently have if it really wanted to, right? And then you detach that part. And then you use that part within you. You go inside and you begin to ask yourself, what would it be like if this were true? How would I feel? What would I say? What would I be seeing? How would I be reacting to things? And it's actually a process of discovery. Because in my experience, I don't know what it would be like to be me, would be like if I had the thing I want. I actually have to go within myself and find it. I enter into that state. I find out what that feeling is like. And then I watch myself and I see how I think, how I feel, how I behave when that feeling is a part of me, when I am aware of being that which I want to be, aware of having that which I want to have, rather than being aware of being a person who wants it and doesn't have it. Can you tell the difference? And it really is, it's an esoteric thing. It's a mystical thing. It is this thing where I don't give some kind of baloney response of, oh, everything will be wonderful. It's like, no, specifically, what would the emotional experience be like to have this, to be a person for whom this is natural? And so you enter into that state in your little meditations that you do in this imagination. And then once you know what the feeling is like, you work on keeping that feeling alive within you as you move throughout your day. You experiment with interacting. And the other thing is that you engage in self-observation so that you watch how you see, this is funny, you watch how you see your kitchen, right? I'm telling you, you see your kitchen differently when you are aware of being who and what you want to be than when you are aware of being something other than who and what you want to be. Look at the kitchen as someone who is aware of being on top of things, who is aware of being on the right track, who is aware of being worthy of what she wants, who is aware of being in possession of what she wants rightly. Look at your kitchen from that state of awareness. And then look at your kitchen from the state of awareness called, oh, I don't really know if I'm going to get it. I don't know if I don't deserve it. Maybe I'm not worthy of it. I'm really behind. I don't know if I'm on the right track. The world, which looks the same, feels different to look at. Feels completely different to look at. And so what we're going to be doing is kind of, I know I have wrestled with myself for 4 or 5 years in trying to do this. And, there are all these wonderful spiritual injunctions. Be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. Oh, and I'll tell you, I heard these things growing up. And I was just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. Get really into Jesus. Don't just kind of give it lip service. Okay, can I play Nintendo now? That was kind of my thing, right? And it wasn't until I actually started trying to control my imagination that I studied my own recalcitrance. I'd sit down and read Neville, and I'd go, okay, yeah, be aware of assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Right, that's genius. I want to tell everybody about that. Put the book down, get up, and assume the feeling of not having what I want instantly, like that. Like I'd read it, I would be delighted by it and excited about it and all of that, and then my mechanical mind would take over, and I would go throughout my day exactly as I would have gone had I never read the stuff at all. And so one of the things for me is going through a bunch of Neville's writings, and there are these little statements, and I'm like, oh my God, right there. I want to spend 30 minutes talking to people about this and really trying to get them to understand, bam, bam, bam. Don't you understand what it looks like for you to do this? This is so important. If you could do this, do you know how much control you would have over your life? Did you want to say anything?
Yes. And the coolest, and it's so funny and fun and wonderful. This class is just going to be a blast. And really, Awareness School has been heavily influenced by it. Sometimes we will, in those meetings, go down tracks. In our last Awareness School alumni meeting, it's so fun to talk about these things, and it's so radical because I was raised very super evangelical Christian. And so and so my perspective on that shifted, and then I wasn't, into it in the way that I was raised being into it. And Neville brought everything back full circle because of the way he describes the Bible. It is absolutely so fun and mind-blowing because it's all the stories that I'm uber familiar with, but it's brought to life within you. And so we'll talk about these stories, and when you really get the symbolic significance, when you start looking at the Bible not as the transcript of something that happened thousands of years ago. Like when you look at it as a transcript of something that happened thousands of years ago, it's a certain one-dimensionality. But when you see it as this like symbolic, meaningful, and it's all about creating the stuff that you want in the world. I mean, it is the coolest thing ever, and it's so fun to talk about. And when the way that Neville describes the stories, you start to feel it, like truly, like the Bible comes to life in your life, which sounds so ridiculous and funny. Again, just kind of given the contrast and both of our experiences and what we like, the way that we were raised. But now being like so into it, ridiculously into it, the way that we quote Bible verses to each other is in the most, and again, just when you're looking at the essence of what is the message that this is getting across. Is this about a bird and a rock and someone who tried to trick his dad? Is like, is that what the story's really about? A bird and a rock and someone trying to trick his dad? Is like, or is it about they wrote in a certain way, like the biblical language is like it's written in a certain way, and everything means something else. Everything is a symbol for something else, and you have to know what those symbols are. And when you get the word, you understand. Oh, what's the difference? It's the wine and the water, or like the
I would just say one thing, and you mentioned Blake even before we got on here, but Blake says that the Bible evokes, it does not describe. And Neville talks about this, that everything contains within itself the capacity for symbolic significance. And that because one of the objections that a person might have is, well, why on earth would somebody speak symbolically when they could just spell it out plainly? And it's kind of like, well, I have a difficult time describing a person's imagination to them now. Imagine it's 3,000 years ago, and I don't even know if there's a word for imagination, and you're trying to describe things that are so subtle that they are ineffable. And so that's part of it. But the other thing I have to say that, like, as Neville describes this stuff, and I would read a story and I would go, okay, yeah, whatever, and then like come back to it and all this, that something happens within your mind as a result of a sort of open-minded exposure to these ideas and to these interpretations that evokes from you an understanding of what's being talked about, the essence of what's being described here. And it's a strange process. It's like a snake shedding its skin as you kind of lose all of these really like anachronistic's not the right word, but like it's the 90s, you're in a weirdly carpeted room listening to people talk about people 3,000 years ago, and there's like pictures of them in robes, and like there's like brass shields and chariots and there's a lot of just super idiosyncratic stuff that it is anything but personally relevant to me. Do you know what I'm saying? So and Neville's whole thing is that his job was basically to scrape away the barnacles, because like when these stories were originally told, they weren't period pieces. It was if it were told today, you would describe, you would use contemporary kind of things to kind of illustrate these fundamental psychological principles. And so the basic idea is that when you understand what's being discussed is something that is the most personally relevant thing you could possibly imagine. Not something you should be excited about or that you should care about, but something that's actually truly fundamental to you. That there are figures described in the Bible that basically the people who are discussed in the Bible are representative of human states of consciousness through which you pass. That like God would be just generalized consciousness, that Jesus is imagination, the capacity to the capacity to forgive sin. Oh, I had a shitty day. Now I'm going to imagine if I'd had a wonderful day. Well, that's that's a forgiveness. Oh, my partner behaved in a way that I don't really like. Well, I'm going to, or my partner made a mistake and feeling bad about themselves. Well, I'm going to see him as competent. I'm going to see him as someone who's really living up to his potential and who is aware of his value and worth as a human being. That's forgiveness. How many times do you do it? Well, 70 times 7. What does that mean? As many times as it takes, right? Until you are fully self-persuaded of it. And so the most wonderful thing for me is, and sometimes people, when it comes to like manifestation stuff, or I want this and I want that, they're like, well, no, spiritualism is about something other than that. You shouldn't be interested. My personal experience is, you want what you want, you're interested in what you're interested in. Neville says that all of life is the satisfaction of hunger. It's natural and appropriate for this worldly existence. The whole purpose of it is to learn to relate to your desire properly, to use your imagination, to relate to the desire intelligently, to not miss your mark. And my personal experience is that it doesn't matter what you want. What matters is that you imagine properly in order to get that thing. And in that practice, a genuine reverence for the spiritual presence that exists within you does begin to organically take root inside. I did not set out to have a reverence for my consciousness or a reverence for my imagination. I wanted what I wanted, and I wanted to get rid of what I didn't want. And it wasn't until I was honest about that and I really started to work with my imagination and to pay attention to what was going on mentally in an attempt to get what I wanted, that I actually had experiences with this stuff, that with this presence that's within me, that the character of my life began to change in a substantive way. And I began to actually want the best for other people in situations where perhaps I would not have wanted that. Where, I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but you sense this presence within you. I mean, in the beginning, I'm just trying to imagine, and feels like I'm just kind of thinking. But after a while, you can just close your eyes and you feel the activity of imagination within you, and you are so grateful that it's there. Isn't it amazing that there's something that it's like to be me? Isn't it amazing that I have this gift called consciousness? Isn't it wonderful that I have this thing called imagination? It's so easy to take imagination for granted. It's and I understand if you're not getting much out of it, if you spend a lot of time imagining unwisely and it's not working for you or whatever. But like, isn't it wonderful that you have the capacity to paint pictures other than those which are offered to you by your physical senses? Do you know what I mean? That you could be in a room you don't want to be in, and that you could paint a picture internally of a room that you do want to be in, and become so lost in that image, enter into that image, and be aware of being from within that image. Isn't that a marvelous talent? And if that doesn't seem like an amazing thing to you, I would suggest that you read Neville and take imagination school, because I didn't used to feel that way either. I was like, yeah, it's great. It sounds like poetic crap. How do I make money? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do I, you know what I mean? Like, that was I didn't realize how much unconscious contribution I was making to the life I didn't want. I didn't see it. I didn't see how I was misusing my imagination, how I was failing to use it wisely. Let me give you just a really practical tip, because I don't know who's watching this, or what your experience with us is, or what your experience with Neville Goddard is, or with Christian religious language or whatever, right? Have you ever been sort of lying in bed at night and you can't go to sleep, and you are anxious about some other person? You think that they're mad at you, or you think that they're going to be mad at you, or you're going to have a talk with them and you're concerned it's not going to go well. I think this is a fairly common thing. Maybe, I don't know if it's just me, but like most people, I think have had...
Very common.
Like no one does this, right?
Nobody does this.
And so for a long time, I had done a lot of really interesting sort of, I got in control of many aspects of my mind, but every once in a while, something would come up, and I think it would remind me of something from childhood. Oh, I'm nervous, I'm going to get in trouble. Oh, I don't want this to go well. Did they think that I meant that? That's not what I meant. Oh my God, that's probably what they meant. All this different stuff. And I would be consumed with anxiety about what may have gone wrong or what might go wrong in the future, about the horrible feeling of the uncomfortable interaction that might happen tomorrow. It was really a sort of grown-up horror story. And I could never figure out any way to get myself to not worry about that. I tried to focus on what I wanted, and it didn't work, right? The only thing that has ever worked for me, and it works every single time, is if I'm worried about you being mad at me, I start imagining wonderful things happening to you. I start imagining you telling me about something fantastic that happened that I think that you would be very happy to have. So I imagine something wonderful happening to the person I am nervous about or worried about or whatever. instantaneous freedom from that. There's actually a story in the Bible about Job that actually is about that there was this guy and he was suffering terribly and he was trying to do all the right things in order to make the suffering go away, and it wasn't working and he was very frustrated. That was me. And at some point he began to pray for his friends, right? He began to, instead of sort of dwelling on his own plight, he began hoping, imagining nice things for other people. And when he did that, his own plight was lifted. Now, do
unto others as you would have them do unto you. Here we have another, golden rule that everyone's so familiar with, but it's like, that's what prayer is. It's like, it's imagining nice things for other people, and how easily that can lift you out of a state of fear or self-pity or, oh my gosh, what's going to happen, by imagining lovely things for people. And that becomes this new just like way of living. Like you're constantly imagining nice things for everyone, right? What is, you do good unto your enemy. Pray for those who hurt you and spite you and stuff like that. Like it's just something you start practicing, and you see how it shifts the state of consciousness of the person who's doing it.
So, like with the Job thing, right? The traditional interpretation, what I kind of got growing up, and I wasn't really listening. I'm pretty sure someone told me about it at one point. Was Job asked God to help him. God didn't like that. Job asked God to help his friends. God did like that. And so then Job got what he wanted. So it's like, oh, okay, I see what I do. I'm going to trick God into give me what I want by asking for nice. It's like, but in my instance, as I'm lying in bed consumed with anxiety, what was I? I was conscious of being a person who is misunderstood, conscious of being a person who's going to get in trouble, conscious of being a person who has to worry about what other people might think of them, right? Consciousness was displeased with me. We'll say in this instance, God was displeased with my activity, the misuse of my talent. When I began to imagine nice things for those people, right? I was relieved of the plagues of anxiety that were on top of me, that were driving me completely nuts. Consciousness was pleased with me. You see, it wasn't something outside of myself. I pleased this presence within me, something that's in me. It's not me. It's not the me that's talking to you right now. That's not what I'm saying. But there is something within you that is sort of a foundation upon which the you that I'm speaking to you right now is based upon, and it makes that part possible. And so it is about interpreting these things in a way that, what's that say?
Who do you think set life up in this way?
I mean, I don't really think too much about that. For me, it's very experiential. For me, what I do is I kind of read Neville and I say, what's Neville saying? And I go, okay, what would it be like if it were true? What would it make sense for me to do if it were true? I then begin to do that, and I see what happens. And for me, what has happened is good stuff, very good stuff. And I would say that when you start to get good at this, something happens where you feel extremely well taken care of. As you move throughout your day, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like for much of my life, I felt as though I were a locomotive that was sort of around the dirt. I was kind of, you know what I mean? I was kind of moving, and I kind of didn't know exactly what I needed to do or whatever, and I was sort of vaguely anxious about undefined things I wasn't doing. There's nothing specific I'm neglecting, but I'm probably neglecting something, and the thing's going to be okay, maybe that. But when I really make wise use of my imagination today, tomorrow has a glide to it. And it used to be something that would happen sometimes. Sometimes I would be in the zone. Sometimes things would be really great. But when I really lay down lots of tracks today through wise use of my imagination, tomorrow, there's just a glide to it. There is this, and we kind of joke about this in awareness school, but I'm sure you've heard, do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? This kind of hilarious Protestant thing. And it's like, I hope you know that I have a sort of humorous intent in even bringing that up, because I heard that so often and I didn't understand what that meant. And I was like, I think you guys are weird. I don't get it. But as I have learned to use my imagination, I have to say, I feel as though I have an intimate, personal relationship with this presence that exists within me. And I don't just turn to it when I'm in a pinch. It's like trying to pick up I have this kind of funny dream where I get invited on stage to fill in for someone playing for AC/DC, and I don't know how to play the guitar. That would be like a dream come true for me, though. But I'm like brought up on stage. I'm thinking, fuck, I don't know how to play at all. Maybe I will I just be able to get through? You know what I mean? And it's but it's just kind of like I don't know, probably psychological inadequacy dream or something like that, where you get the great opportunity, but you want to tell them you can't do it, but you can't do it. And like I'm so afraid of disappointing them that I'm going to allow the show to start with a guitar player who has absolutely no idea what they're doing, because that'll turn out well. But like you don't want to wait until there's a crisis and then say, okay, hang on a second. Jesus Christ is my own wonderful human imagination. Let me try to imagine things and everything will be fine. You'll be overcome with anxiety. You'll just evoke the opposite from yourself. But I found that when I just imagine, and it's so hard to train yourself to imagine the best in all things. Oh, that duck, how's that duck doing? We don't know. She's got a little funny thing going on. Let me imagine the duck really well. Let me remember to imagine this duck well all the time. That doesn't mean I'm not going to feed her. It doesn't mean I'm not going to, give her medicine or something. That seems like the appropriate thing to do. It just means that you're thinking about stuff anyway. You're always using your imagination anyway. I guarantee you, you are imagining conversations that you have had or think you're going to have with your spouse anyway. The question is, are you imagining those conversations going wonderfully? Are you imagining them saying the things that you want them to say? Are you imagining feeling about them the way that you want to feel? Stop and notice how you feel about yourself. Is it the way that you want to feel, right? Now, for a lot of people, what they do is like, oh, I feel like crap about myself. Let me go make more money. Let me go have sex with someone. Let me go get in a relationship with someone. Let me go get a degree. Let me go run around out here and do different things to try to change the feeling of I. And those are what's called vain oblations. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but the whole thing is, so long as I'm carrying around an awareness of being other than that which I want to be, everything I do on the outside in an attempt to become who I want or to feel good or whatever, I do those things in vain. Like the real master skill in life is to appropriate the awareness of being who and what you want to be. And the way you do that is through your imagination. You ask yourself and by the way, when I say use your imagination, that's got funny connotations for people. This is using your imagination right here. Things are a certain way and I don't like it. I say to myself, I wish things were different than they are, right? Here comes the imagination. What would it be like if things were just as I want them to be? What would it be like if things were just as I feel they should be? In my personal life, what would it feel like if I felt as though I had done exactly what I should have done today? If I had a wonderfully productive day, I was kind and loving to my children, I was loving and respectful towards my spouse, I was productive, I made wise use of my talents, I did all the best practices. What would that feel like? What would that be like? And the mission is, as you lie in bed, to use your imagination to enter into the state of awareness of being that person. Find that feeling, hold on to that feeling, don't let it go, fall asleep with that feeling. I'm telling you, interesting things start to happen. If you're like me, it's going to take you a while to figure out how to do this, but it is an absolutely wonderful way to live. You want to say something?
No.
Okay. One thing is, so one of the premises, and this is one of the big premises of Imagination School, is imagination creates reality. Another one that's closely connected with that, consciousness is the only reality. Those are claims, those are statements. If you don't believe that, or if you don't know if you believe that, or if that stretches your capacity to believe it, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I never worried about it. I just said to myself, all right, let's pretend like this is true. Let's pretend like this is true. If this were true, what would it make sense for us to do? Well, it would make sense for us to observe our mental activity. It would make, go to the casino and blow all of our money because it doesn't matter consciousness. No, that's not what I would do. I would observe myself. I would look at what first of all, I get good at detecting imaginal activity as it's occurring within me. Is that me imagining right now? Is that imagination? Because I'm telling you, it's happening and you don't even know it. You think you're thinking, you think you're just listening to somebody else, but there's imagination that's happening. So I'll give a fun example of this. I was running on the treadmill. I was listening to Alex Jones for fun. It's like I listen to Judge Judy sometimes. I like to listen to things that make me laugh. So I'm listening to Alex Jones, and I'd been doing quite a bit of like Neville and imagining and all this different stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to listen to this new stuff, not because I think any of it's important or real, but just to kind of get a little change up while I'm running. And so I said, I'm going to see how long it takes for me to get imaginally entangled in this information. I was like deliberately going to do it. So I get on the treadmill and I'm kind of just, and I've got this little timer and it reminds me to say to myself, imagination is an operation at every moment in time. And it went off and I said to myself, imagination is an operation at every moment in time. And if it did not immediately reveal to me, I had begun imagining, oh my God, those people are doing this, that's terrible, oh my Lord, and this is happening too. And I was emotionally involved with the stories I was telling myself inside. I had become, and I was able to detect the imaginal entanglement that was happening. And I said, well, what if that's a misuse of my talent? And this is not like policing yourself or what they call scrupulosity, where you get like, super OCD about whether or not that was like, oh no, am I going to hurt someone with that thought? It's not that. It's just observing that, listen, this talent was given to you so that you could misuse it, so that you could learn how to use it properly. That's the idea. And so, there's all sorts of ways that you could misinterpret this that will give you grief. You're not supposed to do it that way. If you do it, tell us and we'll help you. The idea is that you learn to get a hold of this thing. If you have a bow and arrow and you're trying to hit the bullseye, you're going to miss the mark most of the time. Missing the mark means that you're aiming. You know what I'm saying? Not finding the solution means you've begun to look. Wonderful. Good for you. Everyone's passing through this. And that's one of the things that's wonderful about Neville, his cosmology. We won't get too far into it, but the basic idea is that people get plopped down here and that you live and you live and you live through kind of not reincarnation, but basically that you pass through all these different human states. And in so doing, you have experiences that begin to reveal your true self to you. And part of that is learning how to do this thing called, operating your imagination wisely. And it's very interesting, for instance, the story of Jacob, where, which apparently means he who wrestles with God. And speaking of, what an absurd story that a human being is involved in a I don't know if I assume it's probably like amateur wrestling, not professional wrestling, but like some sort of a physical
grappling
role, right? Yeah, with like loincloth, like Greek kind of stuff.
Yeah,
like a very dignified
professional wrestling.
It's not like I just like Jacob's like flying off the top rope and landing a Randy Savage elbow,
like a South Park skit,
right? And so anyway, that
would be really funny.
he who wrestles with God, but what's really interesting though is when you begin to attempt to control your imagination and to get it to focus on what you want and not to remind you of unpleasant things or bad things that might happen to you. No. I'm giving you one thing. I want you to take me to the promised land, which is the awareness of being that which I want to be. Thanks for all that unpleasant, horrible imagery. Take me over here instead. It's a very challenging thing. I could understand why somebody might describe it as wrestling with God. You are engaged. You are attempting to learn to operate this amazing power that exists within you that is slippery and invisible and intangible, and it's there, but you can't get a hold on it, and it's in you, but it also is in you as you, so it's really hard to kind of get to, you know what I'm talking about? It's really hard to do it on purpose. I can imagine unintentionally all the time, but when I really, I could take a gun outside and I could go, right? But if you say to me, listen, there's a target, it's about 100 yards that way, and I want you to put the bullet right in the center of it. That's a significantly more challenging thing. And for a lot of people, I think, this is me for most of my life, my imagination just pretty much ran along lines that were determined by what was happening outside. If someone said something I liked, I imagined wonderful things and felt good. If something went the way I didn't want it to go, I imagined unpleasant things and I felt bad. If a girl gave me positive attention, well, then I imagined that I was quite something and felt fantastic. I was aware of being somebody who really had a lot going for him, right? If I had a disappointing interaction with a person, or if I felt like someone was making fun of me, well, my imagination immediately took me into a state of being unwanted or weird, or whatever the case may be. And so it's learning how to really operate your imagination on purpose and to do less and less of your imagining by accident.
Yes, so this is an interesting question, and I think Neville was actually asked this question, like, what happens if you imagine that imagination is a pattern from Jesus who is real, and the pattern is because you're made in his image? Do you feel like that detracts? And I don't think at all. I mean, if you want to believe that Jesus was a real person, if that is helpful for you, it's just for me and the way that I grew up thinking about like these people outside of myself. It was like this, the character. I just know that the relationship for me is very different when it comes alive in this allegorical, descriptive, like this metaphorical way. For me, it changes because I feel like there's still like this separation. I'm trying to be like this person who was perfect, rather than to realize that Jesus said, I am the way. But he didn't say, I, Jesus, the person who's alive on the, right now. He didn't say, I, Jesus, am the way. I, Jesus, am, he said, I am is the way. So there's no way to God except through me. And so the way that Neville describes, I am in me, that's your name. That's what you call yourself. And so, that was that totally, it changed the fundamental characteristic of everything that's described in the Bible. When you look at I am me, the way that this is consciousness. That is the thing that's alive within you. And so, some people, will maintain their kind of traditional beliefs about the historicity of the Bible and of the characters. And you're welcome to do that. I don't think it detracts at all from it, but I do think that there can be a bit of that external, like, oh, Jesus died for your sins. Like when I grew up, it was very much, there was this man who was so perfect and he did everything perfect and he took all of the bad stuff you've ever done, he took it away from you, and he, and you watch the Passion of the Christ and you see this like really just like vivid traumatic a illustration of what this person did for you, and you're supposed to live in this like love and reverence, and you're supposed to be nice to people because of what don't be mean to your brother because Jesus died for your sins. He was literally beaten him. Like it's kind of, when you think of it, I don't know, I've really changed my perspective of when you think about it in like the physical historicity way. It's, I don't like that description. It doesn't feel like, but when you think of it in this way, it's totally different, which is very interesting because Imagination School starts on March 3rd and it goes all of March and all of April. So we're kind of going to go through, like the 40 days before Easter, which will be very interesting because we'll describe all of the stories of Easter and all of it from the Neville perspective, which I find very helpful.
The thing about this is, when it comes to the historicity of the Bible in general, when it comes to the what would you call it, like the biological existence of Jesus as a personage, right? It isn't necessary for whatever reaction you have to whatever you think it is we're saying is a normal reaction. It's fine. Don't worry about it. The one thing I would say is that, and Neville does say that Christ is the name of a pattern of salvation, a pattern, right? As well as the one in whom that pattern is realized. And so there's room for that. Now I'm not arguing away from historicity here or arguing away, but any step away from the traditional belief that you take towards what it is that we are attempting to describe here is a step that is an increase in intimacy and an increase in relevance and an increase in, I would say, the trueness of the story. When it comes to the historicity thing, I've always gotten the sense that a lot of traditionally Christian people, when someone questions the historicity of the Bible, they question the literal, they feel as though the Bible is being relegated to something of secondary importance. That the most important things are those things which literally happened in man's fleshly history. And I kind of thought about that. I was like, well, I can understand why someone would feel that way. But it's like, gosh, as I'm kind of understanding this Neville stuff more and more and more, it's like, this is a truth that exists independent of time. This is a truth this is more true than any fact from history. And I don't even know if that makes sense to you. It's difficult to articulate. Maybe I'm not doing a good job of it. But like, this is, because I grew up around a lot of people who believed in the historicity of the Bible. And when I began to come upon this, I didn't say, the historicity is false, this is what's real. I said to myself, this is so much more real and imminent and sort of infinite and contemporary and living now. It's all happening now. The crucifixion is happening now. All of these things are these states of consciousness exist now. Human beings are passing through them now. And so it isn't something that I would force. I wouldn't worry about it. I would just say, don't neglect the psychological interpretation in favor of, so when it comes to like idolatry, right? Any image that I have, I don't think idolatry, a graven image, has to be physical. I think a graven image can be psychological. My consciousness paints a picture of God, and I point at that picture and I say, that's God, when in fact God is the consciousness itself, right? And so there's this thing where it just, don't neglect the awareness of being. Again, if you've got a certain entanglement or a certain commitment to traditions, it's fine. I'm not interested in convincing anyone or of arguing with anybody about really anything. I would just, if this piques your interest, do you know what I'm saying? Consider these interpretations and allow them to sort of work together. Pay attention, because it is a presence inside. It's there, and when you discover it, you say to yourself, how did I miss this? How did I miss? I mean, just stop for a second. And anyone, I didn't have much of an inherent interest in the Bible. I really didn't. And I wasn't really seeking for anything spiritual. You got into Neville. You said, hey, this guy named Neville Goddard, he's cool. I read the book, The Power of Awareness, and I said, this man's describing things that I've been interested in. And he's saying that the Bible's describing things I've been interested in too. But it uses language that maybe isn't immediately apparent. And so that was kind of the path that I took. It's a strange thing that the Bible claims that God said that his name is I am. That's weird. That is a strange, again, forget about whether you think God really said that. Forget about whether you think the Bible is true. It's weird that people wrote a book in which God is alleged to have proclaimed that his name is I am. What's that about? I mean, they're just primitive. They're just patriarchal. They're just this and they're just that. Okay, fine, whatever. But that, none of that explains why he is said to have described himself or have given himself that name, I am. That's weird. I say I am. Those people said some version of I am all the time. Why is God made to have said, my name is I am? But that's strange, right? And it was again, Blake says that the Bible evokes. The Bible evokes from the mind. And this is this whole story sort of Jesus talking about the various types of soil into which the seed can fall. And there's always one I can't remember. It falls on the highway, it gets scorched, falls in the area next to the highway and it gets trampled, falls in the area kind of further away from the highway, it kind of goes down a little bit, but then there's rocks that get in the way so it can't take good root. But then like off to the, good way off to the side, there's that nice fertile soil and it takes root. And the roots not only sprout, but they go deep and deep and deep, and they permeate deeply into the mind of the person. And I think that those different types of places where the seed can fall are different states of mind that a human being passes through. That it falls on one and it's just kind of like, that's just religious gobbledygook. I'm not interested in that. It falls in another one that says, that violates my tradition. That the stones in the soil are a person's traditional beliefs. And that the traditional beliefs and that which, strictly speaking, may be sort of a form of idolatry, right? Obscures the seed's ability to really spread in the mind of the individual. I mean, and this is this thing too, there's a number of people who would probably describe us of heresy, of all sorts of really terrible things. It's like, well, the Bible depicts Jesus Christ as being described as, or accused of all those different things by who? Pharisees, right? People who were very kind of committed to traditional ways of thinking. Now, in my mind, whether or not, obviously there were historically people called Pharisees, but whether or not the people described there, it is a state of consciousness. It's in me and it's in you. There have been times when I have said from a place of traditional thinking, no, this has to be nonsense. This doesn't make any sense. So there's this really wonderful thing when you understand that these biblical characters are representative of human states of consciousness that exist within every person, and that consciousness over time and through life enters into this state, plays this role. Jesus telling the truth, the Pharisees rejecting it, the ambivalent Pilate saying, I don't know what the fuck you guys are talking about, but whatever, right? Just leave me alone. I'm just trying to administer this area. All that, we've passed through all these different places before. We've been condemned and we've turned loose and we've, you had an opportunity to release Jesus and you chose to release Barabbas, all these things. And so as you begin to recognize those states, you begin to recognize, I've been in those states. And your impulse to judge and condemn those states or the people who are in them and expressing them naturally diminishes. It's not that you'd like to condemn them, but you restrain yourself. It's that you just go, listen, and this is but for the grace of God go I, this whole thing. Kind of the idea is, I have either been in that state and done as that person is doing, or I will at some point in my future be in a state like that and do what that person is doing. So you begin to, one of the things that Blake talks about is to distinguish between a state of consciousness and its occupant. Right? Now, what that means is that if your partner is in a state that is causing them to behave in a way that is very irking and grating to you, right? Forgiveness is not where you just put up with it because that's what you think your wifely duty is or your husbandly duty is. Forgiveness is where, as you see them doing that, you distinguish between the state that they are in and the expressions of that state and the essential eternal being that is in the state. That's forgiveness. Forgiveness is when you see that there's something in there that is unaffected by that state and that will exist and outlast the state. It's saying you aren't your worst behaviors, basically, right? That you could enter into a state and that God, consciousness I am, could enter into a state of poverty for 1,000,000 years, literally 1,000,000 years, right? And never be changed by that and would retain its ability to exit that state at any moment in time. So it's kind of recognizing that that's the beginning, I think, of a real forgiveness and not sort of a prim, obligatory kind of thing.
Definitely. Yeah, so it's going to be really fun. We're going to be having conversations like this for 9 weeks, getting deeper into the way that Neville describes things, and then also just like what comes up, so what comes up for you when you try to apply this idea? What comes up? That's like how it is in awareness school. It's like, okay, when you try to apply this idea, what comes up for you? What is difficult for you? What do you find yourself really stuck to in consciousness? And so we're going to be really just playing with these ideas in a light, fun, irreverent sort of way, as we like to do, and just help it to come alive. right? And that's the thing is like, for me, this stuff has come alive for me in a way that, it just seems, it's just so different and it's so fun. And like, I just can't stop smiling just because like, this is like so fun to talk about.
It's weird how fun it is. It's weird. It's weird we're into this. It's so strange for me to talk about these things. Do you know? Like, it's strange, but I remember when you first brought this to my attention and I started reading it, a little bit of God, a little bit of Jesus, blah, blah, blah. And it was very clear right from the beginning. It's not the traditional stuff. It means something different. And there was something inside me. I remember I wasn't resistant to it because of my history with the religious stuff. But I was surprised by what an utter lack of resistance there was. And I was saying, I ought to be really put off by this. Like, I ought to say, you know what, but it would remind me of certain things, but it was undeniable that Neville was talking about something different. And one of the first, and sorry to jump in, but like this is just, I think this is important. One of the first kind of impressions that I had was for me to have nothing to do with the Bible because of the people who originally introduced it to me, or just because of just life experiences that just weren't that fun associated with it, right? And more than anything, it wasn't like I was it just didn't seem real relevant to me. It's just kind of like, I don't get it. Okay, whatever, But to reject that would be less different, or to reject this new stuff on the basis of the connotation with the old would be closer to the old than would embracing this completely new idea. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I had this feeling that was just like, this is what this person is telling me right now. It's so consistent with my experience, and it's like it was lifting. I say, like, as you experience this firsthand more and more, all of this kind of spiritual stuff begins to feel more like sci-fi than old, stodgy, sandy religion. that you know what I'm saying? That there isn't. Some of the stuff that Neville describes and sort of the sort of visions that he had and all this different stuff, it's not like, and then they went to the temple, and then
like
the
the
temple
Matrix.
was it is more like the Matrix. It's getting into kind of the essence of existence, the essence of creation, that there is this kind of the idea that Neville says, and this is like, he talks about, like, you lose the traditional belief, but there's no diminution of reverential feeling, that the story is absolutely beautiful, that God essentially dies to himself in order to become you, right? So that he ceases to be conscious of being God and becomes conscious of being you, in you as you, so that you can just wander around this earth, bumbling into one bad relationship after another and one financial disaster after another, and let me enter into this horrible state and languish in this hell for a certain period of time. And he does this knowing that he is the one that wouldn't say, I am suffering, I am lonely, I am heartbroken. That's God's name. And so he gives himself to you completely, sort of by becoming you, so that you can basically abuse the crap out of him for just on and on and on, so that at some point in your journey, you can start to hear a message like this and start to awaken to what's going on inside you. Now, that's talk about, like, what is it? What greater love is there than to lay down your life for your brother, or something like that? Like, what an amazing thing. Think how much you would have to sort of love a being. Like, I don't know, if you drew a cartoon character or something like that, and it was like maybe based on you, but it was made in your image, but it was a different person, and you built out the life story of this person, and you fell so in love with this character. Like, you just loved this character so much. You said, you know what? I wish that this character had life in herself in the way that I have life in myself. I mean, I've written this, I can even animate it and all this, but it's just doing what I want it to do. I want it to have life of itself like I have life of myself. And so the only way to do that is to basically bury yourself so completely in that character that you cease to exist to you, that you don't pretend to be her. You literally are her. And through a series of events, basically, you extract yourself from her. You become aware of being God and of being that person. And so there's this really, I mean, it's not like, oh, this is just sort of milk to, what is it? Or like very kind of like, this is new agey Christianity stuff for people who don't want to follow any rules. It's like people who claim that about Neville, they don't understand Neville. It's the most intimate, truly intimate. Not like, God set up this system where you're not supposed to do this, but he also made you want to do it. And then he also gave the son, but he gave the son because it was his rules that said you were going to be in trouble if you did. It's not like that at all. It is this process where everything is happening in order to push you through experiences that will eventually allow you to awaken as God and as you, so that both, and so there's this thing where Neville says there's no loss of identity. And so it's this really wonderful cosmic reproductive process, if you think about it this way. It's this wonderful thing. Yeah.
I was going to say, there's so much to unpack with this topic. I mean, like all of the, and that like, it's the most fun and creative and interesting thing. Someone asked something about GNM. We're going to go live again on Sunday and talk about, how you can, like, what would Imagination School, because a lot of people, the reason you're here, the reason you follow me is for the biological stuff, and the GNM, which is very, like, strictly, like, this plane, this experience, this physical body, and we'll talk about how you can utilize this, and if you're interested in Imagination School, how if you've got a health thing, how you would, how the state of consciousness, how that's related to it, and how you can kind of see how this teaching and this way of thinking could help you to, redeem the situation physically that you're in even.
I have a GNM story we can tell too.
Yeah. And so a couple of things. So it starts, I guess it's 2 weeks from tonight. It'll be on Monday evenings for the classes will probably be about 3 hours long, to 7 p.m. Pacific time. And it's going to be so much fun. And we are doing one scholarship, one entry to join us in Imagination School. If you share any of the posts that I make or Steve makes about Imagination School leading up to it, you'll get an entry to be one of the lucky winners who wins a scholarship to join the class with us. And so, yeah, we'll be live again on Sunday. Feel free to reach out with questions. But if this like tickles your fancy, if you're like, these conversations are going to be so fun and incredible and really just help you to make this tangible in your experience. So thank you for being here with us tonight. We could just, keep on talking for 3 hours like we will in Imagination School. So we hope you'll join us. Have a good night.
See you. Thank you.